Humiliate me? I'll tell your wife you're cheating on her. About 5 or so years ago, I was working as a server at a pretty nice place. It was a brand new restaurant, so servers as well as managers are still getting their grip on things, and things are changing rapidly as management tries to figure out what works best. We had this assistant manager, we'll call Carl, that had a terrible superiority complex. He would treat me and the rest of the staff like we were always incompetent, but was super buddy-buddy and friendly with the manager and owner, so nothing was ever said and done about his behavior. Carl was married to his very pregnant wife, we'll call her Sarah, who would come in around lunch quite often to bring him homemade goodies and to say hi. This was always incredibly awkward for the staff, as we all knew Carl was sleeping with another server we'll call Rebecca. Rebecca would also often be working when his wife would come in and would be extra friendly towards her. Carl would always kiss his wife and be sweet and loving. I didn't say anything and neither did anyone else, even though we often talked about how terrible we all felt for Sarah and whether we should. Ultimately nothing was ever said. But one day I'm working a crazy dinner rush, in the weeds, still doing a great job with my tables as I had already been serving for around 8 years at this point when Carl calls me over to a table. The guests are sitting with their freshly brought out dishes as Carl proceeds to ask me in the most condescending tone, "Can you tell me what's missing from this table?" I proceed to look and realize one of the guests doesn't have a steak knife yet, so I say, "A steak knife," and proceed to turn to go grab one. Carl grabs my arm and forces me to stand there as he tells me how unacceptable it is to forget a steak knife, and that these types of mistakes will not be tolerated and I should be very careful about remembering these things going forward. The guests look very uncomfortable at this point, and because of his raised tone I noticed the neighboring tables are listening as well. I flushed red and apologized and went to get the steak knife. I proceeded to do very well the rest of my shift. The next few weeks my shifts are cut to 2 lunch shifts a week and no dinner shifts, compared to my usual 4 dinner shifts and 3 lunch shifts, running 11 of the days. I become very concerned immediately as I'm living pretty much week to week off my tips/paycheck. I go into my next shift early and ask to speak with a manager. Carl's already in his office waiting. I ask about my schedule and he proceeds to tell me that they've hired new staff and everyone's hours have been reduced, but when I go and ask my coworkers, 2 of them complain that they were given my shifts and actually don't want them and were upset to be working the weekend. The same thing happens for 2 more weeks before I'm finally able to speak with our manager, who informs me that Carl does the scheduling and did voice the steak knife incident and used it as his rationale that I'm not cut out for dinner shifts. I'm livid as I really was working so hard, was recognized by my other managers for doing so well, and was never addressed for any other issues, only given praise. This proceeds to happen for another month before I finally get another server job I had applied for pretty much 2 weeks after. I quit the other place, I excel and am quickly promoted to closing the new restaurant as well as given the best closing shifts because of my work ethic. As all this was happening I really kept replaying every conversation I had with Carl and how absolutely rude and demeaning he was to not only me, but everyone else. We often had girls cry during the shift because of his behavior. So I try to see if I can find his wife on Facebook as I know his first and last name. I find her right away. As I'm no longer working there I decided to send her a message right from my personal account detailing what I saw with him and Rebecca while I was working there. I mean, it was terrible. Rebecca wasn't shy about telling anyone who would listen about the hotels they'd rent for the weekend, what their sex life was like, and even how he says his wife just doesn't please him anymore. I told her everything with as much detail as possible. She read the message but I got no response. 2 weeks later I hear they're divorcing and he's been fired because his conduct was finally revealed to the owner after another server quit on the spot in the middle of a shift because Carl yelled at him in front of the staff about not folding the napkins correctly. Last I heard, Carl moved to a small town in the middle of nowhere where he's the manager at a local diner. His wife remarried and took full custody of their baby boy. Subscribe to help me pay my tuition.